Hey everybody, welcome back to the Convo Couch. I am Fiorella and I am here with Jonny Sue on the ones and twos. Pasta is getting ready for Nicaragua. We're very busy. We will be flying out soon. I wanted to just come on because I have Kit Clarenberg coming on to talk about BreadTube. I just recorded an interview earlier today with Martin Kulldorff, who is one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. And so I will be posting that as soon as I can as well. So yeah, busy times. I wanted to ask you guys to please share this stream. Please like, share, and all of that good stuff. We are also on Rokfin and Facebook. So hi to everybody there. And we're going to get started because we do have our guests coming on in about 30 minutes or so. Okay, so I'm talking about this in terms of what the Democratic Party has done and, well, what they haven't done, and how people are still trying to use a lot of words and the same type of arguments to still push this whole vote blue no matter who agenda, is this whole vote blue no matter who situation where they're still acting like they're doing something different when they're really not. And so I felt like it's necessary to point it out because this is what's pushing people to the right or away from politics or just to complete total like disregard for any sort of anything, because there's so much bullshit that gets spewed by both the liberals and the Republicans and excuses made for whoever they like, whether it's Trump or AOC. People making excuses for Trump are just as bad as the people making excuses for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They're just as bad as the people who refuse to see that there's no way forward through the Democratic Party. So I'm going to play this video instead of admitting that she was in the wrong, accepting the criticisms of, why people were going after her, because AOC, of course, was here in Florida. And she was enjoying the quote unquote freedom of Florida, meaning there's no lockdowns, there's no vaccination card requirements, you're not required to wear a mask. And so instead of acknowledging that the criticism was valid, considering she was saying Kathy Hochul could give pointers to Governor Ron DeSantis, she sort of completely doubled down and made it about her boyfriend now instead of her. So this is a video of her doing just that. And I want you to notice how this behavior is very similar to what you see online and on BreadTube and with all of these people that are terminally online. So take a look.
So we recently went to Florida, where Republicans developed an obsession with Riley's feet. So give the people what they want. So we recently went to Florida, where Republicans developed an obsession with Riley's feet. So give the people what they want.
So, as you can see, she was saying that she went from the Republicans are obsessed with me, they want to date me, to they're obsessed with my boyfriend and his feet, just kind of mocking the situation. It's just, she's also mocking her supporters because she thinks they're dumb enough to, and some of them are, to fall for this sort of, oh my gosh, they're just mean to me because I'm Latina, because I'm a woman of color, because I'm a woman, and because they want to date me. And so now anybody that criticizes her is sexist, right? Remember when it was before forced to vote and anybody that criticized her was committing violence via tweets, and then she sent out an email demanding that people take down these tweets or mark them, or Facebook posts, or any of these things that were harassing her. And pretty much that same type of behavior is what we're seeing now regarding the pandemic, regarding any sort of discourse that is anti-status quo. And it is unfortunately a segment of the progressive contingent from the Bernie Sanders movement that has become the new liberals right off of their training wheels, and has, they're pretty much the ones that are pro-authoritarian, just canceling anybody that disagrees with them. There's no debate, there's no discussion. It's just like, if you don't agree with everything I say, you are absolutely a fascist, nutsball, right-wing, white supremacist. And it's that same sort of behavior. There's no exchange of dialogue, there's no logic, there's nothing. So what you end up is living in this echo chamber. So DeSantis responded in this video, and this is what he said.
If I had $1 for every lockdown politician who decided to escape to Florida over the last 2 years, I'd be a pretty doggone wealthy man, let me tell you. I mean, Congress people, mayors, governors, I mean, you name it. And it's interesting, though, the reception that, that some of these folks will get in Florida, because I think a lot of Floridians say, wait a minute, you're bashing us because we're not doing your draconian policies, and yet we're the first place you want to flee to basically to be able to enjoy life. And so I'm not surprised to see that continue to happen.
So Governor Ron DeSantis, of course, is somebody that has received criticism for also playing into a lot of the, team sports mentality. And he deserves the criticism. In this case, though, he's absolutely right. It is hypocritical. And it's true that a lot of these people were in these states like New York, which like you have to show your Excelsior pass to go anywhere. This is the state where they escape, right? And of course, Florida in general is a state that has sunshine and has just good, like better weather for beach weather. Even in the winter, you don't have like the same type of winter as you do everywhere else. But it's this whole thing that AOC was in a huge crowd not wearing a mask when she has been a staunch mask wearer advocate. I know people who are such staunch mask advocates that they wear masks all the time, and they would have also been wearing a mask, even if it wasn't required in Florida. So that's no excuse. So it just, you catch this air of hypocrisy, and people don't like that. That's why Donald Trump got a lot of people on his side, because he played the guy of the people, the man of the people, the regular and non-politician type of candidate. And so, he made people feel like he was one of them, because he kind of went down a level of, I'm just a guy who loves to play golf and who's a regular old American. People really don't like it when you act like you're superior, like when you have the rules for thee and not for me. And so that's what AOC is portraying, that same type of Gavin Newsom behavior, where he was eating at a restaurant, French Laundry, while advocating everybody stay at home, not leave their house, and wear masks all the time. So it's that hypocrisy that people are really speaking against. And speaking of really bad politics and really bad ideas, all of this goes along with that sort of lockdown leftist mentality, where there's a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of elitism, because there's this whole class of people who are laptop workers, right? So basically they don't have to leave their house to do their job. There's nothing wrong with that. But it also gives you a sense of falseness of this reality that we're living in. Not everybody has the privilege of sitting from home and doing this work. Some people have to go out and be supermarket workers, or be retail workers, or be hospitality workers. And those people, when you have lockdowns, are the most affected. The very working class of people that can't afford to stay home and are either forced to go out and work, or are forced to leave their jobs and lose a lot of money and just rely on the government. So Walker Bragman put out this whole menage of tweets pretty much saying that we need to continue to support the current system. He said, fixing our democratic institutions will likely take decades of work. The fight won't be won or lost in a single election cycle, and it only ends when we give up. We have no choice but to hold on to hope that we can fix our system. Fascism feeds on nihilism, starve it. Then he continued saying, these are precarious times we are living through. The right has weakened our institutions systematically over decades to combat unfavorable population trends and cultural shifts. As a result, our government is barely functional, unresponsive to the basic needs of the people. And then he continues, that dysfunction is laid bare in the time of crisis like what we are facing today with climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. People are rightly frustrated at their obvious lack of power to affect what is happening around them. It is in times like these when fascism takes hold. Fascism is not always obvious. It appeals its appeals are insidious. It preys on vulnerability, insecurities, long-held prejudices, and frustrations. It offers its own myths, its own realities, where the problems stem from weak, detestable oppressors and promises quick fixes. In the context of a pandemic, we see fascists promise a return to normal if we just embrace quick cures and bootstraps. The continuation of public health measures is framed as an assault on masculinity and American values by the expendable, weak, selfishly protecting themselves. And okay, so I'm not gonna read the rest of it because it's just a bunch of bullshit too. But like, he continues saying like, you know, that anybody that isn't for lockdowns and doesn't want to, you know, protect the vulnerable in the way of lockdowns is pretty much supporting fascism. And it's funny, he talks about fascism because it isn't easily recognizable, but the fascism he is claiming is pretty much focused on only the right wing, right? Only on Republicans, when Democrats have done a large deal of damage during this administration and prior to it. The reason we have Trump is because of Obama. I said it many times. And then we have Biden because of Trump. They play off of each other. And one of the things that Walker misses in this assessment is the fact that we don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. He's preaching reformist neoliberal ideas. He's trying to patch up some deathly disease with a Band-Aid. And that's not what's going to work. It's not going to work. Also, we're not going to get rid of this so-called fascism by voting it out. You can't vote out fascism, especially in a non-democratic system where you don't have fair elections. And this team has constantly proven that our elections are far inferior to many in the rest of the world, including places like Honduras and Nicaragua. Empowering this corrupt system will not lead us away from fascism, but it's going to lead us towards fascism. If you empower the corrupt system that caused the disaster in the first place, how do you expect to resolve it? And lastly, people like Walker have given up in actually opposing the system. They just want to be a part of it. They want to feel good that they're doing something for all these people in these vulnerable populations that they say they care about. But the actions that they're pushing, like these lockdowns, are actually hurting the most vulnerable. Example, if you are a wealthy person and your kids are told to stay at home, you can hire a tutor, you can have the other parent be there for kids, you can hire a house sitter, you can have the kids, you can make sure your kids are getting the education they need. If you are a working class parent and your kids are told to stay at home, what are you gonna do? You're gonna suffer, because if you still have to go to work, what's going to happen to your kids? How are they going to learn? How are you going to make sure to look out for what's happening? And kids are the least likely to be affected negatively by this virus. They have the most robust type of ability to fight it. And so when you say things like that, people like Walker turn it around and say you're being you're pushing eugenics, that you don't care about poor people. But the reality isn't that. The reality is quite the opposite, that you want people to get better. And so this is why we talk about, talk to people like Martin Koldorf, who has a different opinion and who understands as a doctor and a public health official that lockdowns have been largely detrimental to children, especially the working class, and especially a lot of people who have emotional and psychological issues. So it is from this mentality of reformist ideology where you're just fearful of everything and you don't want to shake the system too much, that's going to lead us into a more fascistic path. So it's just no longer acceptable to really have this sort of faux critique. It's not a critique at all. You're telling people to put their faith in the same system that's let them down time and time again. The only solution is to really go outside of the system at this point and start building parallel structures. So that was that section, Johnny. Yeah. And let me see if we have any super raids. We have Trey Wright. Thank you for the super raid contribution. AOC is the queen of whining. Yeah, I mean, she knows what she's doing. And the only reason I mentioned that is because I wanted to really go and talk about the Democratic Party and pretty much people like Walker and what they're doing. So look out for that video. I will post it as soon as I can. Right along the whole COVID-19 sort of different opinions on lockdowns, one of the presidents who has been sort of controversial, he's not super far left. He's more of a, I would say, a libertarian-minded kind of guy. He has kind of been trying to place it smart with the United States. He receives a lot of criticism from the left for his, he used to be like a leftist and then he sort of strayed away from that. And he's big, obviously, on Bitcoin. He's been talking about Bitcoin. El Salvador, of course, put Bitcoin as their second currency under the US dollar. So Nayib Bukele has been urging his citizens to work out and eat healthy to defeat COVID. He has been talking about COVID in terms of it's a health issue. But of course, the health ministry of El Salvador was the one that produced this ad, and he shared it, and he's largely, obviously, in favor of it. So let's take a look at this ad, and then we can discuss what people think, because there's a lot of controversy with an ad like this in the United States.
Mantener un estilo de vida saludable también ayuda a reducir las complicaciones por COVID-19. Los grupos con más riesgo de mortalidad son los adultos mayores y las personas con obesidad, hipertensión, diabetes y enfermedades crónicas. Por eso pon en práctica estas recomendaciones. Aliméntate saludablemente con una dieta balanceada para acercarte a tu peso ideal. Haz actividades al aire libre. Así respiras aire fresco y recibes algo de sol, lo que tu cuerpo necesita para producir vitamina D. Toma por lo menos 2 litros de agua al día para mantener tus riñones saludables. Reduce el estrés dedicándote tiempo a ti mismo, por ejemplo, haciendo yoga o leyendo un libro. Trata de dormir no menos de 6 horas al día. Incluye cítricos en tu dieta, como limones, naranjas o mandarinas. Evita el consumo de bebidas alcohólicas, alimentos altos en azúcar o en grasas saturadas. Hoy más que nunca, debemos cuidarnos entre todos. Mantente saludable. Gobierno de El Salvador.
Great. So, as you guys can see, they focus primarily on saying people should work out, eat a healthy diet, eat enough citrus, and also have sleep. These are basic common sense things that people should do. Health is one of the main things that actually determines so much of your life, and more research has led doctors and scientists to really understand that your stomach, your gut, is extremely important. In fact, it has its own sort of brain. And I've talked about that, obviously, in my personal life with other people, and it really makes a huge difference what you eat in terms of how you feel and how often you get sick and all of these things, and having like good immunological health. Dr. Fauci has barely ever said anything about this. I mean, they say it in passing, but they don't consider it a huge component of beating COVID. When you look at the hospital rates and the characteristics of people who are actually dying from COVID, the people who are at most at risk of that are obese people, people with diabetes, and people with underlying conditions. That is a fact. So in America, where we have a very unhealthy population that relies on fast food, a lot of the reasons why is because of poverty. It's because it's quick and cheaper. And so you have this whole thing where you start thinking, well, wait a minute, if it was about our health, they would give us better food. They would give us access to natural medicine. They would really focus on not stressing people out so much, because America is a culture where you live to work instead of working to live. It's one of the main criticisms that other people in other countries have about Americans. You know, we're overworked, we're underpaid. And so that sort of system leads to people being unhealthy. And it's much cheaper if you go out to eat unhealthy than it is to eat healthy. If you cook, you can still manage to eat pretty healthy. Rice and beans, and I would say vegetables aren't expensive, but it is more expensive to buy, say, non-meat products out when you're out and eating, and salads and fancy salads can be expensive and all of that. So a lot of people are too busy working to actually feed themselves properly, but people have to think about it in terms of, if I don't spend the money to eat better, I'm going to end up spending more money in the hospital. And that's the way I look at things in terms of what I eat. But one of the things that is criticized in America is that this is ableist, that an ad like this is very it's fat shaming people, basically, right? And you really mainly only get those criticisms in the West. You mainly only get those criticisms from Americans, because if you talk to pretty much the vast majority of Latinos, the vast majority of people in Europe, you don't get that same type of pushback. You get people embracing and saying, yeah, we got to eat healthier and all of that, especially in Europe, where Americans are known as having huge portions. They're known as being just overweight. And some of the things that are legal here in America, some of the products and the processed foods that are legal here in America are illegal in other parts of the world, including in England and in countries like France. So I don't see this as being ableist. I see it as being extremely honest about how a lot of the liberal culture has embraced, the whole be proud of your body and be proud of your imperfections is good. But some people take it to the extreme of be proud that you're extremely obese. And, people have different body shapes. Some people who are very skinny are unhealthy. And that doesn't mean that they're healthy just because they're skinny. There are a lot of people who work out all the time who just don't have the body type of being lean. That doesn't mean they're unhealthy necessarily. So it's not about that. It's about health, and it's about being able to say this without being told that you're being ableist. And it's not ableist to tell people that they should eat healthy and it reduces their likelihood of being severely affected by COVID. You can go to any scientist or doctor that will literally tell you that. So I wanted to point that out because it's interesting. You don't hear that discussion much in America because it gets turned into, this is all about ableism. You're making fun of fat people. You're telling people blah, blah, blah. One thing I will say is that the lockdowns also hurt in this regard, because a lot of people gained weight during the pandemic because you weren't allowed to go outside. The gyms were closed and people were just sitting at home, cooking, baking, eating, and drinking. So yes, that made you more vulnerable to getting COVID. So that's something that's never talked about for fear of offending people. And I think we have to get over that and start understanding that what we eat really is of huge importance. So props to Nayib Bukele. I don't agree with him on everything, but I think we need more of that. And by the way, he also mentioned this video on hospitals, how their hospitals are empty and they're using that to pretty much take advantage of improving things. Yes. Okay, so I don't have that tweet, but he's showing the Zuby tweet. All right, I wanted to show this tweet. Johnny, do you have my Twitter open? Can we send the link to our friend? So this is from Frank Analysis. He said Jordan Cheriton made this tweet about, talking to his friend and how he made the point that, well, insulin isn't made illegal because diabetic people have to take it. And so Franco responded with, I didn't know insulin was mandated on the entire population, including people who don't need it. A lot of these people are making comparisons with seatbelts, with, having to wear clothes inside a restaurant, with all these things like insulin that don't have anything to do with the actual reality of forced vaccinations, which is a completely different thing. You're talking about, even though the CDC says these vaccines are safe and effective, they were largely pushed via the EUA, the Emergency Use Authorization. They didn't have enough time to have trials. It is, by many accounts, to many people, an experimental vaccine. So to say that this is the same thing as insulin is just a straw manning. And it's these sort of arguments we have to start really destroying because they're not built in any sort of honest analysis or honest foundation. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And I have one more section I wanted to go over. But if you can come in, that's fine. If he's ready, I'm good. Yeah. Yeah, I know. So I don't think so. Okay, so let's just go on to the next section. I wanted to really talk about this because, okay, well, he's here. It's fine. I just didn't know how long it was going to take. Hey, Kit.
Hey, Finn, how you doing?
Good, good. No problem. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. Can you please turn on
it's
your
my
camera?
pleasure. Huh?
Do you have your camera on?
Yeah, it is on, yeah.
We're not seeing it.
Um,
Let's see. Yeah, it shows a black screen, so I'm not sure.
okay. Yeah.
Hmm? Bear with us a second. We still good? Are we live? Okay. Hey. Sorry, guys, we're sending him a new link. Some crash. But yeah, I mean, I just think that that a lot of these people's arguments need to be shot down now because there's no sense in entertaining these arguments that it's the same thing. We're talking about a therapy, a gene therapy that you're asking people to put on, and some people can't because they have underlying conditions and they're told by their doctors, this isn't a good idea for you. And so their doctors are saying that and they're following their doctor's orders and it's not working. Like it's not working. People aren't listening to them. They're calling them anti-vaxxers, people who took the vaccine and have talked about whatever side effects they say they've gotten after taking it. It may be correlation, you don't know for sure, but you know, they should be allowed to talk about it. There's like an inability to have this discussion, and a lot of that is based in a lot of this, like we talk about it all the time. I was on Jackson Hinkle's show yesterday where we were talking about the woke left, and I hate the fact that they've hijacked that word because it's not wokeism. Woke was supposed to be something good. It was supposed to be something like, oh, you're aware, you're awake you're aware of this whole bullshit, the whole matrix. And it turned into something really just focused on this social, just superficial jargon where they make these gateway keeper type of parameters, and if you dare go outside of them, you are viciously attacked. And by the way, I gotta give a shout out to Slow News Day for that great interview he had with Dan Cohen. That was a great interview, just talking about everything that's been happening with the pandemic and all of that stuff. Because I think more and more people on the left talking about this stuff, it's important. Not because of the whole, you know, ideology aspect of it, but the fact that we need to destroy that narrative that it's only right-wingers who are debating or having discussions on mandates and lockdowns and the COVID narrative as a whole. It should be allowed. And one of the things Martin said that I will post later is that this is killing science. It's killing this inability to discuss this whole just way where you're going after leftists for talking about this and smearing them as right-wingers is destroying the left, and it's destroying any sort of future scientific endeavors, because now people aren't going to actually trust real scientists. They're going to start questioning everything, and so everything they're doing is pretty much backfiring. So I just wanted to point that out. I think it's important to point those things out. So yeah, are we almost ready? If it doesn't show up, we can just go without his video. Can you hear me, Kit?
Hey, Fiorella, how you doing?
I'm good. Your video's still not showing up, but I don't know if you can do anything about it. So at this point, we can just go on.
Yeah, sure. Let's go ahead.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna just sort of introduce a little bit of pretty much what we're talking about, because you've been on several shows talking about this whole situation, and BreadTube is a very specific area, and I want you to tell us about it, but it's a very specific part of the YouTube internet. And during your article, you and Max Blumenthal talked about their connections to the intelligence and establishment narratives. And this article talked about the leaked files exposing Syrian PSYOP veteran astroturfing BreadTube star to counter COVID restriction critics. So there's a sort of interaction between the two, but I want to let you talk about it. I put some of the article up. I'm going to read some of it, and then I'm just going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
You guys started out by saying, by covertly recruiting popular YouTube influencer Abigail Thorne to counter growing opposition to UK government COVID restrictions, PSYOP pros are bringing home the tactics they honed in the Syrian dirty war. Leaked documents have revealed a state-sponsored influence operation designed to undermine critics of the British government's coronavirus policies by astroturfing a prominent founder of the BreadTube clique of anti-fascist YouTube influencers. The project aims to conduct psychological profiling on British citizens dissenting against policies such as mandatory vaccination and lockdowns, then leverage the data to establish a YouTube channel that portrays these critics as dangerous super spreaders of disinformation. So nothing new there. Who is Valent Projects, the company that you have these leaked documents, and who have been at their exact clients?
Okay, so I mean, look, Valent Projects was started by an individual called Emil Khan, who is a veteran of information warfare operations in Syria, funded by the Foreign Office. His roll call of clients is really quite interesting, not least because he counts among them Amnesty International, and he was actually providing PR and communication support for armed groups in Syria, particularly in Aleppo and places like Douma, while Amnesty International was publicizing hideous human rights abuses committed by these same groups. He also has the Royal Institution as a client, which is where this clandestine online campaign to extol the virtues of getting vaccinated was commissioned. So I mean, in terms of BreadTube, I was somewhat unfamiliar with them until, quite thankfully, until I actually started delving into this. And so, they are an online, kind of a loose online collective of content creators who, their kind of stated raison d'etre or modus operandi is to produce content which will de-radicalize viewers. And so they engage in what they say is algorithmic hijacking. They will produce videos based on trending hashtags or viral trends which are related to the right wing. Although it's abundantly clear that they try and create a false synergy between the anti-imperialist left and the far right. And this is a canard that they relentlessly propound forever. I mean, I think that, I mean, in terms of violent projects like this is a guy who made an enormous amount of money, effectively trying to whitewash the violent reality of armed groups on the ground in Syria, and try to convince Western and indeed Syrian citizens that, like, regime change was a positive outcome in the country. And yeah, I mean, while it didn't actually result in the overthrow of the Assad government, it was enormously effective in terms of framing this conflict as one between radical well-meaning progressive forces and indeed this fascistic government on the side of the Syrian authorities.
Yeah, and those narratives are still prevalent today. I mean, you even see segments of the left still regurgitating the same type of fears. And in these leaked documents, we can see this entire planned PR layout for combating COVID, quote, misinformation. Can you summarize what that entails, especially in regard to YouTuber Philosophy Tube Abigail Thorne?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, I mean, this was as I say, a covert communications campaign, which was intended to frame any and all opposition to lockdown restrictions or, vaccine mandates, or, just generally vaccination, as somehow anti-science, as somehow fascistic, extremist, prone to violence. And so the various project strands state that Valent was going to conduct a kind of demographic research on people who are vaccine hesitant, or are in two minds about, I don't know, children wearing masks into school, and then from there forge a communications campaign which Abigail Thorne would secretly front, and as I say, extol the virtues of getting vaccinated, and indeed propound the idea that anyone opposed to these policies is somehow extremist, is somehow dangerous, anti-science, anti-vax, and extremist character. And I mean, Abigail Thorne may well be a well-meaning actor in this. She may be entirely good faith. She may have just thought that she was, furthering the public good by doing this. She may have had no idea that this forms one strand within a wider effort to frame any and all opposition to government pandemic policies as somehow lunatic, aligned with QAnon and all these other kind of very bizarre belief systems. And this has been ongoing from the very start of the pandemic. And it's probably quite hard to quantify, but I would suggest that actually there are an enormous number of voices on the left, kind of dissident, anti-government, anti-establishment, journalists and activists who've been silent, or unquestioning, at least publicly, about lockdown restrictions, precisely because of this campaign, of which people know nothing. You don't want to associate yourself with extremist lunatics, so you leave it alone. And as a result, it has gifted a monopoly on so many questions and debates and topics within the pandemic to the right. So in the UK, for instance, you have a government which is, obviously, borderline fascist in so many ways, aggressively pushing vaccine passes and vaccine mandates, which is a precursor to digital ID. But the only people opposing them, vocally, are like right-wing lunatics. There's no left opposition to this, which is a fundamentally authoritarian, pro-surveillance, pro-social control proposal. And and Abigail Thorne efforts amongst others will have been fundamental to furthering this narrative.
Right. So yeah, we see this trend of shutting down discussions or any sort of hesitancy on even mandates on people who have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, saying, hey, I suffered from X issue, or I'm against mandates, are being called anti-vaxxers. So the narrative is shifting to any sort of hesitancy makes you a right-wing, Nazi-affiliated anti-vaxxer. And you're right, absolutely right. A lot of people haven't said anything because they're afraid of being associated with that crowd. It seems more damaging, though, to not talk about it, because there should always be regardless of ideology, some sort of pushback against the status quo. The left used to be more aware of the surveillance state, more aware of the abuses of power. Somehow they've shifted this perspective, at least especially in America, in regard to pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer, who have made billions and billions of dollars off of this pandemic, and who have largely just completely manipulated the information via these giant organizations of government like the CDC, the FDA. And a lot of people feel more distrust in the government. So it kind of works, it's kind of counteracting, it's kind of not working to their advantage. But do you think there's a segment of RedTube that actually has ties to the intelligence state based on what you have researched?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, whether these people are fully aware of what darker purposes they're serving and darker objectives they're furthering is, I mean, that's an open question. We don't have the evidence, but it's abundantly clear. And it's like, I mean, Caleb Maupin, who again, I was somewhat unfamiliar with him and his work before I embarked on this endeavor. Like, he makes the point that the New York Times is promoting these people who, in theory, have Marxist, pro-left views. When was the last time the mainstream media endorsed or amplified people, of that disposition? Never, like literally never. And so, it very much seems to me, if you look at any of their kind of public outpourings, or like or if you can even call it their kind of general philosophy, it seems to be what amounts to a call for lockstep adherence to mainstream imperial narratives dressed up in radical self-righteous rhetoric. And it's about setting boundaries and setting very sharp limits on acceptable thought, like this far and no further. Like, yeah, it's okay to support worker cooperatives as long as you're not getting the government to do it, as long as this is just a personal thing. Wider structural issues and questions are just not addressed. And so, yeah, like, I mean, the CIA has a very long history of doing this, as does MI6. Like, during the Cold War, the British and American intelligence services funded and managed and directed, allegedly progressive magazines, because they served as a very sharp limit on what was acceptable in terms of thought. And then, I mean, you look at Vaush. I mean, I had the immense displeasure of watching a lengthy debate he had with, if you can call it a debate, with Owen Jones, who's a British leftist, whereby he was coming out, Vaush, I mean, was coming out with all of these very bizarre arguments, which you kind of, they seem to be like a kind of a product of a particularly coked up CIA brainstorming session, where he was suggesting that actually America and Americans allowed imperialism to happen in Syria by not stationing more troops there. And it's about furthering these imperial narratives. It's good when America intervenes in other countries. It's on the basis of humanitarianism and rights. When Lebanon is bombed into the Stone Age, and so whether they know or not, it would be entirely unsurprising if they're taking direction from the intelligence services.
Right. It seems like they're also attacking largely anti-imperialist voices. As Caleb mentioned, as Max has mentioned, they've attacked people like Jimmy Dore, the Gray Zone, anybody that has done a lot of immense work against the imperialist agenda. You'll get a lot of, in America, you'll get a lot of these democratic socialist types that are pretty much pushing the squad, like reformist sort of liberal ideology, calling themselves communist or socialist, and they exist in vast amounts in the internet, and they constantly are attacking anybody that's like, wait a minute, what happened in Syria was, there wasn't a chemical attack by Assad. Assad didn't gas his own people. They're regurgitating mainstream media talking points from the lockdown to, things on China, on Nicaragua, on any global southern nation that has actually pushed back against U.S. hegemony. And it's very obvious to a lot of people, but I think some people are still falling for it in terms of the culture situation, right? Like how it's so focused on a lot of the issues that people would consider social justice issues above economic issues. So that seems to be the way a lot of these accounts kind of go. But do you think that there is an algorithm by YouTube that pushes this? Because I've never seen a piece written by the BBC on Jimmy Dore or on anybody that's pushing any sort of anti-imperialist truth.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, they participate in, avowed algorithmic hijacking. So, they will leap on alleged trending right-wing themes on social media platforms and, serve as a rebuttal and a disincentive for people to believe these views. But actually, I think that they're probably, very heavily promoted but for anything and everything they say on any topic by by YouTube and indeed Twitter and Facebook algorithms, because I mean it's no secret now that the social media giants are waging all-out war on alternative media and independent journalists, and they're doing so with the direction and indeed pressuring of organizations like the Atlantic Council. The Atlantic Council has a formal relationship with Facebook where they dictate what is fake news and which accounts are bad faith actors, and then Facebook bans them, and then this leads to the purging of the pages which document police brutality or promote drug decriminalization, all this other stuff. They will no doubt be getting significant boosts from YouTube. And the other day, Primo Radical, who I consider a friend and comrade, he posted something on Twitter to the effect of that, we need to get off these established platforms while we still can before we get deplatformed. And the very next day, his YouTube channel was blocked. So that's years and years and years of work that the untold time that he'd invested in building up a following, gone in the stroke of a pen. It couldn't be more fitting that he, made this call. I think that, we all need to, as on the left or within, alternative distant circles, have a discussion and just decide to, okay, we need to get off this and get on here now, and then never look back, because it's never going to get any easier. It's only going to get more difficult for people like us to have our voices heard.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things popping up too. And I think from what I've seen, when they, for instance, took down Dr. Robert Malone off of Twitter for what he was posting as a doctor, creator of mRNA and all of that, they took him down. Then he went on Joe Rogan, and it's like they broke the internet. It became the #1 watched podcast of all time. People were really upset when he was taken down. And it elevated his voice. When I was taken down off of Twitter, that also elevated my voice to the point where it went viral, and I talked about it on RT. And so it's this whole thing where them trying to silence people is almost backfiring on them, because people are starting to realize, well, why? I don't know who Joe Rogan is. I don't know who Robert Malone is, but why are they silencing them? What did they say exactly? So that kind of piques people's curiosity. And I think that's the way alternative media should operate, is while, kind of poking the bear by pretty much doing your job and being an actual journalist, find other spaces to talk about things like Rokfin, like, alternative forms of media, and to take them over, because some of those alternative forms of media are led by the right wing, but there's nothing wrong with infiltrating those as well. I mean, there should be a discussion of ideas, I think, rather than shutting them down completely. So I saw that you were accused by Emil Khan when he was questioned about this piece. Can you talk briefly about that exchange?
Oh yeah, sure. I've been here before. I mean, as you know, someone who primarily works on, leaked and kind of hacked documents, I've been accused of all manner of things under the sun. I think back to when the Integrity Initiative, which is a kind of secret Foreign Office information warfare effort, was their files leaked online, and I had numerous people, accuse me of working for Russian intelligence or, threaten me with legal action in prison. So essentially, Emil Khan, he said that he was going to sue me and claimed that the documents were doctored in some way. They'd been kind of amended, cynically and insidiously. But then, of course, when asked for detail, he had nothing to say because what he was saying was untrue. And he's doubled down on this since. I mean, he seems to be possessed of an extremely paranoid mindset. He suggested that I was a bot, or that, my kind of profile as Kit Klarenberg was not real. I am very real. I can assure everyone. But he also claimed that I'd written for a variety of kind of Serbian ultra nationalist websites and all this other kind of madness. And I think this is what happens when people get put in a corner. People who are used to operating in the shadows, they don't really know how to respond because, hey, they've never had to respond before because everything they do is clandestine and cloak and dagger, and no one ever finds out about it. Or, at the most, they'll be quoted in the media as some kind of expert on disinformation or extremism and radicalization, when actually they have nothing to say. He was caught short in a big way. It made him look immensely more guilty than if he just kind of explained the reality of of what had uncovered. But also as well, I think it just speaks to again the fact that he was trying to claim that these documents fake. It speaks to the fact that the British state wanted this campaign with Abigail Thorne philosophy tube kept entirely secret. They had no mechanism in place for how to respond if their efforts got busted, because they just assumed they would never be caught. And so this is what happens when you challenge power, right?
Exactly. And Hamish Faulkner is another name that you wrote about in your piece. Why is him being a Greenberg Fellow at Yale so important? What other people have been those Greenberg Fellows at Yale?
The Greenberg Fellowship is particularly interesting because, you've got to bear in mind Greenberg himself, when he was running American Insurance Group, AIG, the organization which caused the financial crisis, actually, right? He was sponsoring CIA activity the world over and allowing AIG to serve as a front for American intelligence. But amazingly, Hamish Faulkner, Amil Khan's number 2 in every sense at Valent Partners, is a graduate of this elite Yale University program. Another fellow of the Morris R. Greenberg program is Alexei Navalny, who is the highly controversial Western-backed opposition figure who is in Russia, who is currently in jail. Irrespective of whether you think that it's a good thing that he's imprisoned, I personally don't. You can acknowledge that that he is a deep state actor serving to destabilize the Russian state in service of Western interests. Faulkner more generally is a very interesting character. I would be amazed if he wasn't / isn't working for British intelligence. His father, Charlie, was a longtime friend, former flatmate, former roommate of the UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, who served in a variety of unelected government posts following Blair winning in May 1997, and applied quote unquote huge pressure to the then Attorney General in the UK to change his view that invading Iraq would be illegal, which may have played a decisive role in facilitating that illegal war of aggression.
Yeah. It just seems like everywhere there's ties to the intelligence with a lot of these people representing media. I know that I think he was the president of Reuters, was also tied to Pfizer as well, and I saw that connection. Yeah, and it's just you follow the money, and this isn't difficult at all to find these things out. But Kit, I want to thank you for coming on. Did you have
My
anything
pleasure.
else to say regarding BreadTube and regarding the whole pandemic narrative? You guys have been one of the few brave journalists, I know, independent journalists, that there's a handful of us, very small, speaking out against just the whole inability to have a discussion. Aside of what people's beliefs are on the vaccine or not, it should be the ability to have the discussion. Just anything else to say?
Yeah, sure. I just think that more generally, like it behooves anyone and everyone who is avowedly or allegedly of a left-wing mindset to be more critical and more questioning of what's happening. And I understand it's very difficult. Like whenever I have discussions with people about potentially how the pandemic is being weaponized and exploited for the purposes of national security, and is being being exploited for the purposes of social control and surveillance. Like, I always have to preface this with a lengthy throat clearing saying, I'm not anti-vaccination. I certainly not of the view that Bill Gates is trying to turn my grandma into some kind of zombie. Like, it is possible to acknowledge that COVID is very real, that that there is scope for personal and governmental action on it, but then also acknowledge that, hey, this is being exploited, and that actually, unless we're careful, unless we make a very, very, very loud collective noise about this, that is going to be used to implement measures which we would never ever accept usually. And I think also just more generally, the fact that the Valen Project's PSYOP that Max and I exposed is one example of a wider effort, and it is undoubtable that this is ongoing in all Western countries, because this is where this is where vaccines and lockdown are being sold most aggressively, and ultimately we don't know that in the present environment whether any video that we see that's slickly produced, in which someone is making a political, philosophical, or scientific point, is actually being funded by the state. And it behooves us, again, to be cynical and skeptical and careful, because if we're not, then we're going to be we're going to find ourselves in a world that's very different at the end of all this, that is so far removed from normal.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, just at Kit Clarenberg, and also I'm on Substack at kitclarenberg.substack.com. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. We appreciate it.
God bless you. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, guys. So that was our comrade Kit Clarenberg coming on to talk about BreadTube. I definitely want to have Caleb on eventually to talk about more about that, because he wrote the damn book on it, and he's being proven right on a lot of these things, specifically regarding people like Bausch and all of these BreadTubers. There's a specific sort of contingent that pretty much, like he explained, just focuses on making videos to counteract the right. They're not focused at all on like the whole system, but they're focused on just counteracting the right. And so they're making a lot of money off of it. They're being promoted by the algorithm. And this is nothing conspiratorial like you're made to believe. It is something that is actually true. So I thank Max and him for doing the investigative work. And I wanted to bring Kit on because I've never had him on the show. So yeah. The last section we have is about Andrew Cuomo, because Andrew Cuomo is, we know, had charges against him for sexual assault. And unfortunately, all charges against Andrew Cuomo have been dropped, including the sexual assault charges, which people thought were the ones that were going to stick. Those were the ones that they used to get him out of power. But of course, politicians are very powerful people, and they have a lot of pull. And suddenly, all of these charges were dropped. So let's go over the criminal charges that were related to the sexual assault first. So we have CNBC, where they basically summarized that the criminal charges against former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, were dropped. The Albany County, New York District Attorney's Office said it was dropping a misdemeanor criminal charge filed against Andrew Cuomo that was related to a claim of sexual harassment made against him by a former aide. The Albany DA, David Soros, said that the woman's complaint was credible, but that, quote, after review of all the available evidence, we have concluded that we cannot meet our burden at trial, end quote. So the next thing they wanted to point out was that the Albany complaint was lodged 2 months after the 3-term incumbent resigned on the heels of a damning report commissioned by the New York Attorney General's office that found he had sexually harassed nearly a dozen women. All these women came out against him. And so they dropped this misdemeanor filed, and the announcement came 3 days before Cuomo was due to appear in a court for the first time in the case based on the allegation by his former executive assistant, Brittany Comiso, one of nearly a dozen women whose claims of sexual misconduct led to his resignation this past August. And so it came within weeks of the district attorneys of Westchester and Nassau counties saying they would not file criminal charges against Cuomo after investigating claims that he inappropriately touched other women in those jurisdictions. And they said they didn't meet their burden to prove the elements of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's the excuse they're using. Then acting Nassau County DA Joyce Smith said on December 23rd that she would not file charges against Cuomo in connection with allegations that he ran the palm of his left hand across the stomach of a female state trooper in his protective detail in September 2019 at Belmont Racetrack. He said, quote, our exhaustive investigation found the allegations credible, deeply troubling, but not criminal under New York law. This is what she said on the 23rd, just reminding everybody. And of course, right after that, Westchester DA Miriam Roca said that she would not charge Cuomo for allegedly kissing the same state trooper at his home in Mount Kisco and for grabbing and kissing another woman on the cheek at an event at a high school in that county. Roca said in a statement she said that the women's claims were credible and that Cuomo's conduct was concerning, but that, quote, we cannot pursue criminal charges due to the statutory requirements of the criminal laws of New York. So not surprising at all if you follow politics and know that these people get away with literally everything. But that was the one thing that people at least wanted to get him for. We said on the show from the start, especially Pasta, when he talked about this, it is unfortunate that they really weren't persecuting the nursing home debacle. And they started to later on, but because those charges on sexual harassment didn't really stick, neither did these. I mean, this is from the NBC New York. No charges for Cuomo administration after Manhattan DA closes nursing home probe. So they also closed this probe, and an investigation led by the Manhattan District Attorney into the Cuomo administration's alleged mishandling of COVID-19 nursing home deaths has come to a close, said a former spokesperson for the governor. The probe into any potential wrongdoing by the governor's executive chamber has seemingly concluded without the district attorney filing any further criminal charges. The executive, Elkin Abramowitz, who is counsel for the executive chamber, said, I was contacted today by the head of the elder care unit from the Manhattan District Attorney's office, who informed me that they have closed its investigation involving the executive chamber and nursing homes. I was told that after a thorough investigation, as we have said all along, there was no evidence to suggest that any laws were broken, the attorney added. So we know that he didn't act on it and that he knew about it, but nobody said anything except that one state senator, I think Lee was his name, and he had his own issues as well. He was not like a clean politician. I mean, which politician is? But so they kind of focused on that. And of course, they declined to comment further. The two investigations by the New York Attorney General and State Assembly found the governor's administration misrepresented how many nursing home residents died of COVID-19. That alone should have been enough to really get him on something. But of course, we know that him stepping away from or stepping down as governor was what they were going to use to say, oh, justice was served, which is why they made such a big deal about it. Which is why it's what got progressive saying, oh, yay, they're getting him for sexual assault. He's such an asshole. But that was never the issue. The issue was not that that wasn't important, but that was one thing that they could politicize, right? And that the right could politicize with the left. Whereas when you talk about criminal charges for literally being dishonest about the COVID deaths in the nursing home and doing nothing and trying to cover it up, that was really where the meat and potatoes was, and nobody really jumped on that until it was too late. So now nothing has happened to Andrew Cuomo. He is free, and he's likely, who knows, he's probably going to have some sort of news spot as a commentator on a mainstream media channel. I wouldn't be surprised, because this is America. People like Andrew Cuomo, despite doing the things they do, are going to move up. They're going to, they're going to go up in power. We have Anthony Fauci's, we have those people of the world. So it's no surprise, and it's unfortunate, but it, like I said, it's part of the American political agenda. So guys, we are doing a short show today because we have so much to take care of for Nicaragua. So we will be keeping you posted. But that's it for today. I just wanted to lay out a couple of things and talk about BreadTube and talk about all those things. And thanks so much for, supporting us. Thank you to all the Patreons. If you can pull up the GoFundMe, Jonathan, that would be great. And that's for Nicaragua. We're going to be there for sure. But it's crazy traveling now with the pandemic and everything happening. So we have to go and really do all this sort of paperwork, and it's crazy. But we're going to be trying to stream as much as possible there, covering the inauguration of President Daniel Ortega, and really bring you up to the date news, because it's a very, very important sort of event, considering the fact that members from Iran, China, and Russia will be there. And there is obviously the Cold War agenda that the United States is pushing against Russia comes into play with that, with the sanctions that they have imposed on Nicaragua via the Renacer Act, and the calling of the elections a sham or pantomime elections by the Biden administration. So we're going to be covering that, talking to people on the ground, talking to other politicos there, other journalists there. So please bear with us and stay with us. And we will see you soon. From Fiorella and Jonny Tsunami on the ones and twos, Convo out.